Whether you want to be the founder or to work for a startup as an employee, it's interesting to keep in mind the 10,000 feet overview of the life cycle of a startup that we'll see together in this video, because it can help you decide what kind of startup you want to found or to join. I will describe a funnel that I found useful to illustrate what the life cycle of the startup can look like, and which is decomposed into 3 stages: the validation stage, the PMF or product market fit stage, and finally the scaling phase. At the very beginning of a startup, there's usually nothing, and you need to build the business from the ground up. You need to validate that there's a need for the product you want to build, to discover for which types of users/customers, and whether you can monetize it or not. It's what I call the market validation. In parallel, you need to build the actual product and make sure that people like it and use it, and that you are not building a leaky bucket or a product in search of a problem. It's the product validation. And finally, you need to validate the marketing and sales side to understand where to find and how to convert the users you target. Once you validated these 3 very macro aspects, hence the name of validation stage here, you have what we call a first product market fit, which we will cover later in the video. Finance this phase, founders have generally 3 options. The first one is to generate revenue from the customers as fast as possible and pay the expenses and salaries with that. It's what we call bootstrapping. The second option is to finance it with the money the founders might have put to the side or that they collected from their close networks or from loans. And the third common option is to raise money with what we call venture capitalists or business angels, who give money to the founders in exchange of shares in their company. Anyway, what is important to understand at that stage, which is also called the pre-seed seed phase, is that it's a period of high uncertainty and chaos. It might sound super easy to validate the 3 aspects I've just mentioned, but it's actually super hard. Some teams will find the first product market fit in a matter of months, while the majority will take years to do it, if they ever manage to achieve that. You need to constantly experiment and iterate in order to find a good way to approach the market, to build a product that people like, and to learn or to market it. It's no easy task, and it's also why, in my opinion, it's better to start a company in a field that you are passionate about, or at least that you enjoy spending time on. From an employee perspective, it might be a time of pressure and chaos, but it's also a time of huge opportunities for people with no experience. At that stage, if you are smart and ready to make your hands dirty, even if you are not super experienced, you can have a huge impact on a startup and quickly take responsibilities. And this is kind of unique to this stage. So keep that in mind if you want to work in a very early stage company. You can definitely grow much faster in your role compared to joining a company at a later stage. The term PMF or product market fit is very common in the startup and investor world, so it's something useful to know if you ask me. That being said, there's no precise definition of it, so you can use my personal definition of a product market fit, which happens when a startup has built a product that users really use and not only test and play with, that it monetizes it, aka it generates some revenue, and finally it knows where to find and how to convert users. It's basically once you validated the market, product, and marketing aspects that we spoke about in a previous stage. It's also important to understand that reaching that stage is not linked to a certain level of revenue. Some startup will become huge like a Uber, which generates billions of dollars of revenue but loses money, while the vast majority of startups will grow slowly and stay relatively small, generating maybe tens of thousands of hundreds of thousands of dollars of revenue per year, and some being profitable. And the first one is not necessarily better than the second one. It all depends on what the founders want and what they value. A company that might not grow fast but is profitable and that the founders love can be equally fulfilling and enjoyable than a super fast growing company burning millions of investors' money. The most important thing is that you choose or you create a company that is aligned with your own values and your own beliefs, not that you follow the hype only. From an employee perspective, if the previous stage was the chaos one, once a company finds its first product market fit, they will naturally start to structure their operations much more. It's at that stage that the real HR structure starts to emerge with the different departments and the first real managers, whether it's a head of product, a head of marketing, or head of customer success. Don't mistake me, it's still startup style, but it's definitely at that time that more structure is needed. The consequence is that you will probably have less room to grow fast and take responsibility, if you are inexperienced. But on the other side, it's also in this kind of startup that you can learn more from other people and that you will be able to witness how a real business works, which is not necessarily the case if you join a startup at the previous stage. The last phase is the scaling phase and consists of companies like Stripe or Airbnb, which have raised millions and millions of dollars and generate millions of revenue. At that stage, founders face challenges inherent to big companies and not necessarily to the small startups anymore. And it's the same from an employee perspective. If you join Airbnb or Facebook, you will be working for a big company with its benefits, like better salaries and more perks, but also a much more rigid HR structure and potentially more internal politics required to progress in your career. So now that we've seen this funnel, again, take a pen and paper, and if you want to be first a startup founder, write down the type of company you aspire to build. Do you want to go the go big or go home path by taking money from VCs and try to grow as fast as possible? Or do you value more control over your company and you want to build a bootstrap company that might be big one day, but will likely take more time to build? Also, think about the field in which you want to build this company. Are you more into e-commerce, enterprise software, mobile app, and for which type of users? If you want to join a startup as an employee, write down which stage appeals the most to you. Do you prefer to join directly the chaos of a pre-product market fit startup? Or do you want to join first a company that already has a working product, generate some revenues, and is a bit more advanced in terms of business? Second, find and write down the name of a startup that fulfills this criteria and that you would like to join. For the next video, click on this link to continue exploring the startup track tomorrow.